It is my privilege to welcome Pastor Tom Barber to St. Andrews. Pastor Tom Barber is the Chief Executive Officer of the People's City Mission here in Lincoln, Nebraska. People's City Mission provides homeless shelter, at-risk youth, medical, and homelessness prevention services. Pastor Tom is our inaugural speaker for our year of reflection, renewal, and reformation, which we are calling 60-500. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary, and the Lutheran Church turns 500 next October. During the next 12 months, we will discern the future of St. Andrews and discover God's calling for us for the next 60 years of our presence in and service to our community. The intent of 60-500 is to walk through a purposeful 12-month period of reflection together as a congregation. Some of the questions we will ask ourselves are, what is our purpose? How can we serve the community? Does our church look like our community? How can we unite as a congregation and work toward a collective goal? What does it mean to be Christian? What does it mean to be Lutheran? What does it mean to be a member of St. Andrews ELCA Lutheran Church in the Meadow Lane neighborhood of Lincoln, Nebraska? How must we change? Where do we go from here? We need to give ourselves permission to rethink everything we do. In order to learn more about our community and help us discern our future, we are inviting guest speakers such as Pastor Tom from community-based services and organizations. Following Pastor Tom's comments, Pastor Kim will share a brief reflection, and in the Lutheran tradition, we'll ask, what does this mean? Thank you. We welcome Pastor Tom Barber.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My goodness, you break the cold? Was it cold out there or what? Amazing. Thanks for inviting me. And as I'm sitting there listening, I'm really excited about you guys thinking through purpose. You know, I'm going to go off anything I was going to say because the fact is, I really believe one of the great things churches can do today is find their calling. Do you know that the word church in Greek literally means called people? That's its little translation. It's not a building. It's not a denomination. It's a group of people with ministry. And when you look at the early church, not we have to be just like them. Everybody had a calling. So you had Pastor King, but you had the exhorter whomever. You had teacher. We all had different ministries. And those callings were what made us help each other. And Ephesians 4 says that we grow by empowered people, not just empowered programs. And so we have a calling. The church has a calling. And I often find that, you know, that is one of the great things that makes churches explode, is when they realize, wow, God called me too. I have a calling and a purpose and a meaning. And so encourage you guys to do that because that's a powerful, powerful idea that I think will explode churches in the community. So, enough of that. By the way, I'm a Pentecostal preacher. I have 10 minutes. You have to do this because I can go on, okay? And I won't. I'll try to behave myself. Anyway, we have a lot of folks tonight. I imagine you know that with the cold. What happens is we have a policy at the mission I instituted about 10 years ago that when the weather gets bad, we let everybody in. That means if we've asked someone to go because of bad weather or they were fighting or alcohol or drugs, we still let them come in when it gets really cold like this and let them hang, especially when it gets below 20 degrees. We don't want anybody dying on the streets of Lincoln, Nebraska. It puts a big strain on our people, puts a big strain on our resources, but we think it's worth it. And we just always pray the weather doesn't get too cold too often. But we didn't pray hard enough this year, so here we are. And we got a lot of folks. Real brief, Pastor Kim asked me to tell you a little bit about the mission and what we do. I might end with a little bit of a thought-provoking thing. But about the mission, I'll do the quick infomercial. Started in 1907, we're celebrating 40,000 continuous days of being open at the end of this year. We don't know when we opened up in 07. We opened up sometime in 07. So we know by December 31st, we will have been open 40,000 days, lights on, never off, helping people. So that's a lot of folks. We've helped over 1 million people since we've been around. A lot of folks. In fact, just last year, now some of you might be surprised, we helped about 32,000 unduplicated people in the city. So about 11% of Lincoln. And so So we help a lot of folks, and you might say, well, I didn't think there are many homeless people. Well, actually, the homeless are only about 10% of our numbers. The shelter, we house about 350 a night, although we're up more than that right now. About 3,500 people a year, roughly, who are homeless. But we have a medical clinic behind the mission, and there we had, I think, last year, 18,000 patient visits, some crazy number. And we do everything from root canals and dentures if you need your teeth pulled, or we do eye checkups, we've done eye surgery, we have all kinds of things, pharmacy. But what's interesting, it's all volunteers. We take no money from anybody, and we each have one, I said nurse practitioner, but she's a physician's assistant. She gets mad when I call her nurse practitioner. She's a physician's assistant and a volunteer coordinator. With that, we see all of those folks, and then we have a phenomenal amount of volunteers that come and do that. So it's been quite an operation, but 95% of the people using the clinic have no connection to the mission other than the clinic. So that really changed our numbers a lot. And then we have a homeless prevention center. Anyone see it there on 26 in Mill Street? It's down there. Anyway, we gave away, I think, about 4 or 5 million pounds of what I call stuff. What people give us, we give away. And it's food, clothing, pots, pans, dishes, you name it. And we helped about 21,000 duplicated people last year. So when you put all those numbers together, we're somewhere in the low 30s that we're actually helping in the city. What's kind of interesting about that is we only get about 3% of our revenue from grants of any kind. So 97% of our money comes from public giving. And that makes us a little unusual in the country because most groups this size, we either are the largest or not one of the largest agencies in Lincoln. We're doing that without grants, and we're doing that as a faith-based organization, which is also unusual. Most big organizations are federally funded, and we're not. We get all our money from the public. So it's a different kind of approach. We like it. It works. Here's someone who wants to do a tour of the mission. Bring some of you. I would love to give you a tour of what's going on there and seeing all the stuff. Have you seen those safe place signs around the city where the safe place guys, we have about 50 of them. So if a child gets into trouble, they can go to one of these safe place sites, young man like he's young as this, for whatever reason, and we will get them right away and get them back home and get them to whatever resources needed. So we do that too. That's what's going on. I have a staff of 92 people now. We had about 25,000 volunteers last year. What can I else tell you? Out of the $13 million we raised roughly, that came mainly from the public. We have like 34,000 families that give us small amounts, I think, on our $13 million. We had 11 people give us more than $10,000. So it's a lot of folks. We figure about 40% of Lincoln is either giving us something or getting something from us. So our outreach in the community is pretty massive. And we're the only homeless shelter in the city, and that's kind of how we do it. We use kind of an entrepreneurial model to try to sell property. And that's it. You know, that's what we're doing. And we keep growing because, unfortunately, Lincoln keeps growing. We're the only shelter in the city, general shelter. So when Lincoln grows, guess who else grows? The other thing I say about it, and I'll move on, is poverty isn't what you think. I often have people that think, well, homeless are some transient guys on the street, man. Actually, I often have more kids at the mission than we try. Not tonight. Tonight we have a lot more guys. But across the United States, about 40% of all the homeless are kids. So if you want to face a homeless, it's not a guy, it's a kid. In Lincoln, I would say 60 to 65% of all the reasons for homelessness is domestic abuse. Drugs and alcohol would be a distant second. Mental health coming up fast. I'm guessing how many homeless people, nobody knows. The homeless count can't tell you because a lot of people stay with folks. But a stat I've seen around the country, roughly 1% of your city is homeless. It can be more or less depending on what's going on with the economy. About 1%. Do you know 1% of Lincoln is 3,000 people? We're a big city. We're bigger than we think. And so I don't know if there's 3,000 homeless people, but I'm guessing there's a couple thousand. Most of them stay with family and friends. And the paradigm I think that people have still, this is a little city, most of the homeless are transient guys. There's 200 or 300, it's all good. Not true. There are a couple thousand homeless people. Again, most of them are women and kids. And we're probably doing pretty good. Omaha has 4 shelters, all bigger than we are. They house 1,500, 2,000 people a night. And we're half the size of Omaha. If we were doing what Omaha was doing per capita, we'd be 1,000 people. We're 350, so we do less than half of Omaha per capita in terms of shelter. So again, we're way behind the eight ball shelter per se. But I think Lincoln's a great giving community. I've just found out a lot of people don't realize what poverty is like that. I just heard our superintendent of our school say 83% of the kids right now paid lunches. I'm guessing there's at least 30-35% of the city that's really struggling hard with poverty. We have a very low unemployment rate, which is great, a very high underemployment rate, and people struggle. So again, there's more going on than we know. And you know, one of the stories that really helped me sort of understand poverty, because when I first came, I come from LA, by the way, Los Angeles. I grew up in LA. If any remember Pat Boone baptizing people in his pool, I was one of them. I was in the Jesus group back in the 60s. So I was baptized by him, and all the young people, like under 40, go Pat Boone, you know. Anyway, it was a different place. LA has a lot of guys, but not Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska is more suburban. We always have been. And so our homeless problem, our poverty problem is a little bit different than maybe some cities just because of the nature of the city. Although as we grow, that might change. But right now, we probably look a little different than Los Angeles in terms of where we are. But I thought it was okay. I lived, when I first came here, I was a pastor on staff at Christ Place for about 8 years. I had come out of business. I was running a company, about a $25 million company, and I had been in business for a number of years. And decided to go into ministry. When I came to ministry, took a 80% pay cut, became a pastor on staff at Christ Place Church, and that's when we got started in '92. And I lived on the south side of Lincoln. I thought, this is a great city. There's no poverty. This is wonderful. I really didn't understand it. When I got to the mission, I think one of my first ahas was a guy named Grizz. Grizz was a big bicycle dude, 6'6", beard, the kind of guy you probably wouldn't want to meet, you know, necessarily on the streets. Grizz came to my office and teared up and started talking, and I heard the same story I hear from guys all the time. He talked about how, you know, he had a drug problem, his wife left him, all these issues, abused as a kid. But suddenly he really teared up and he said, Pastor Tom, I have a problem. I have a bad habit. And here was the light bulb that went off on me. I got a bad habit. I'm not drunk and alcohol, Pastor. Don't worry about that. But I have a habit. How many of you guys have bad habits? Okay, yeah, most of us don't have a bad habit. Okay, I want you to think of that in a minute. And I want you to add to it addiction. You have that bad habit, but now you're physically addicted to it. So it's really difficult to overcome. I'll add one more. Public disgrace. People look at you and they say, you're a horrible person. And you get that a lot. And I'll give you one last thing. Very little way to get out of it. Here's a little secret most people don't know about those guys on the street where we get the least compassion when we're talking. Most people get out of homelessness what we call a Section 8 housing voucher. It's a voucher the government helps pays your rent for a year or 2 or 3 years you get on your feet. Woman or child comes to the mission, you get it in 3 months. If it's a guy, 2 years. 2-year waiting list. So let's say I'm going to pick on you because you're underneath a bridge. You're struggling. You've got alcohol. You're going to try to get back on your feet. You come to the mission. I'm not going to keep you 2 years. You get a month or 2 or 3. How are you going to clean yourself up, get a job, get an apartment, get back on your feet in a month or 2 or 3? How does that work? Exactly. We say pull yourself up by your boots. They got no boots. Now, some guys get back on their feet because what happens, they have family or friends or people help them. So not everybody's in that situation. But if you don't have family or friends, you're in big trouble. Big trouble. Because there's no way to get out of it. And so sometimes you see guys on the street with very horrible behavior. You know why? They've given up. They have no hope. How would you like to live without hope? They have no hope. One of the reasons we built the Curtis Center, which you come on shorty, is a 2-year transition, was to try to solve that problem. But anyway, I'm sharing that with you to share this one point, because I know I'm going, what's this mean? No. Here's the point I'm trying to make. Poverty looks very different through middle-class eyes than through the eyes of people going through it. That was the big aha I had. Poverty looks really different from middle class when you're doing pretty good than from the eyes of people going through it, because you don't have the whole story. And so we look at things and we have expectations, we make opinions about things, which may be inaccurate because we don't see the whole thing. And that's why I believe the greatest thing the church can do is do what the Good Samaritan parable had, which is show compassion based on need, not on worth. That's what Christians can do in hospitality. Show compassion based on need, not on worth. You all know the Good Samaritan passage, but when the Good Samaritan helped him, he didn't know who that guy was, did he? Who was that guy? What if he was a bad guy? What if he was an axe murderer? What if he was somebody really bad? He didn't care. He saw somebody in need and he helped them. And in a sense, that's what Jesus did with us, didn't he? He helped me based on my need, not my worth. And that's what believers can do. And if I share anything about hospitality, since that's where you're going, you know what? You can't give what you don't have. Our first thing is to find that hospitality ourselves in our own life, to experience God's compassion and love ourselves, so we know what forgiveness and that love feels like. Then we can extend it to other people. And when we do, we can extend it based on what we see the need is, not the worth, because we don't have the story. And that's why I think the mission tries very hard, and I encourage churches, when you go out and you show hospitality, remember, the greatest thing you can do is this agape love, show a love that God showed us, which is based on our need for Him, not on our worthiness. Because the streets you go to, if you help poor people, often it's not worthy. They're not worthy. That has nothing to do with anything. Anyway, I'm going to shut up because, like I said, I could go on. Guys, thank you so much for that. The missions, I hope you come out for a tour. I'm excited about what you're doing, finding your purpose and your calling in this issue of hospitality. Jesus didn't come to have us do good deeds. He came to change who we are, to be good people. And I believe when that love comes into our heart and that compassion, we can't help but give it. Just like when the sheep and the goats, and they separated. Remember that one? They said, when did we do this? They weren't doing it because they did good works. It's who they were. And that's the great secret. God comes to change who we are. And then we give out of what we have. And that changes the world because we've been changed. And anyway, that's the greatest basis for hospitality for believers, because that hospitality will change other lives. Anyway, guys, God bless you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pastor Tom. That was really wonderful. We invited Pastor Tom to come and be with us as we begin this preaching series on leadership and the Renew, Reflect, Reform series. Not just because he's a leader in our community, but because he also shares the passion that we have for hospitality. And he's absolutely right that Jesus came to change us. And because we have been changed, we then can go out and affect change in other people. It just so happened that the Christmas story was on the docket for the lectionary this morning. And even though it doesn't say so explicitly, when I read the nativity story in Matthew, I can't help but hear Luke's words. There was no room for them in the inn. They show up to Bethlehem. There was no place for them. And of course, Mary is actively in labor. The only place they could find was a dirty stable, and that's when Jesus was born. What this means for us, particularly as Lutheran Christians, is that, and particularly on this fourth Sunday of Advent, when we're thinking about the word love, in our fourth part of that series, we take the words of Matthew 25 very seriously, as Pastor Tom said, where there's the sheep and the goats, and Jesus said, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And they said, well, when did we do that? Well, when we do it to the least of these, we do it to Him. What this means is that we take these words seriously. And we do indeed love our neighbors as we love God and as we love ourselves. And we don't just love people. We don't just pray for them. We go out and we take care of them. We show that love. We live it. We make room for the least and the lost and the unseen and the voiceless and the folks that most people don't even think about. And it means that we actively and intentionally choose to show hospitality. That we choose to care deeply about people that most people consider to be expendable. We care about folks who don't have anybody else. Because when we care for them, it is as if we are caring for Christ himself. That's what it means to live hospitality. That's what it means to live the love of Jesus. And it's important that we do that, not just this time of year when we're all thinking about it, but that we do it all year long.